What is up, everyone? I am your host, Andrew Full, otherwise known as the Captain, and I am excited to present to you our new show today on the Serious Angler Network called The Lure Lab. This show is predicated on bringing you our personal insight on different lures, techniques, and some modifications that we think will help you catch more bass. So joining me is going to be Bailey Egbrett and Adam Deacon from the Serious Angler Network and Business from the Bass Boat. What is up, guys?
Not much, man. Fired up to get this thing off the ground. I've been working on it for quite a while, and think it's going to be something unique and cool to show folks in both the video and audio format.
Yeah, episode number 1. It's exciting, right?
Oh yeah, excited to show some people some baits.
Yes, love baits. So we might as well get started. It's episode 1, and we're diving into Alabama rig fishing today, specifically where small bait fish preside, because that's what we have around us, right, in the Northeast in Colorado. So let's kind of dive right in and start talking A-rig. So Deacon, if you want to lead us off, what is your favorite A-rig to throw, when and where and why?
Yeah, so I'm going to go something a little different. I think I've talked about it before on other shows, but it's a Western bait. This is the G rig, okay? And this is by G Funk Baits. And basically, they're kind of a small wire finesse style A rig. Can absolutely handle big fish. Guys in the Delta and Clear Lake and stuff deal with these things all the time. But what I really like about this A rig specifically is so it's tournament legal from the standpoint in the vast majority of tournaments, especially out west, are either a 2-prong or a 2-hook or a 3-hook Alabama rig. And it's got a nice small blades there. I like the smaller blades. Smaller bait fish, again, is what primarily, my opinion, when you're targeting an A rig. You've got 2 screws up top, so you don't have to do anything different with your 2 dummies. You've got 1 main wire coming back far, which is pretty handy for that. That's going to get most of your bites. Then you've got your 2 bottom ones. Everything's with a split ring, an owner split ring there. Real strong, sturdy, and the wire's thin. Pretty sleek profile there. Obviously, you're going to spend those out when you're rigging it. But I think it's an awesome finesse style A-rig. It's got a lot of fish for me, and I really like the concept of having those 2 dummies up and out of the way. And they make applications for 5-wire, 5 bait hooks, and then down to those 2, the single, they call that the desert rig, because that's how it is in Nevada and Arizona, where you can only use 2 hooks on those rigs. But I just think they're very customizable. That's going to be my A-rig of choice.
And I think that's something we should highlight too, the importance of is checking with your state, local regulations, right? Tournament regulations, because every state, province, sometimes counties within states have different regulations for Alabama rig fishing. Like I know Minnesota is 1 hook point, New York is 5. So it's kind of crazy how many different companies have different A-rigs out there specifically built. And we're going to dive into this in a minute, but there are modifications you can do too to make them 2, 1, 5, whatever you need. So Bailey, what is yours?
Yeah, for me, being in New York, we have like you mentioned, the advantage of throwing 5 hooks. My favorite one is the Hog Farmer 5-wire, and I am a big fan of the blades. I haven't experimented too much without blades, but it's actually one that I literally just took off of a rod just now that I was throwing at state championships recently, and it's one it's a very standard Alabama rig, but it's one that's just built with a little bit tougher wires on it. I believe they're titanium wires, whereas some other A-rigs have an issue with wires breaking. This one, you're going to be getting the bang for your buck, and they are a little bit more on the expensive side. I believe they're about $30 to $35, but you are getting a lot more fish on this thing, being that it's a little bit more tough. But again, just you can switch around the blades. We're going to get into modifications here in a little bit, but it's just got smaller nickel, basically blades, because we have smaller alewives here in New York. We'll get into heads here a little bit too, but obviously heavier on the bottom. Middle is about standard, lighter on top, but I kind of keep everything pretty straightforward in terms of swim baits, because we don't have very big bait fish here in New York in certain places. So pretty standard, just a simple 5-wire A-rig, something that is going to stand tough to the, big bottle rocket smallmouth that we have here up in New York.
Yeah, that's a great choice. So for me, it is the Flash Mob Junior because I am on the water a ton and I go through a ton of Alabama rigs. And when my clients break them off, I don't cry over $35. So Flash Mob Junior, arms fly off of it all the time. You have to be super careful with the equipment that you use on it, but the blades are great. There's some simple mods you can do. This is just your standard right out of the package, except for I added a swivel and a split ring on it, so it rotates a little bit better. So when a smallmouth jumps, kind of segueing right into mods, when a smallmouth jumps, or when we're fishing it in current a lot here, where I'm at on the Niagara River, without this, the bait will tend to rotate in the current. It'll make a big loop in your line. So that barrel swivel and split ring help keep the bait level while it comes through the water column. So there's something really easy. I think these are like $13.99. So you can buy 3 of them for the price of 1 hog farmer. So that's why I go for the Flash Mob Junior. And they just work.
And they do work, dude. I think that's the biggest thing. That has got to be the most common for those of you looking to get into A-rig fishing and are interested but don't want to spend the $25, the $30 for the ones that Bailey and I are talking about, because you will lose these very often. And another thing that Andy touched on too is these wires are bendable. And what's nice about Bailey's talking about, they don't break as often, but I think there's something to having that thin wire, get you some more bites sometimes. But and that flash when you're pumping that bait, all those jig heads and that weight can make it move. But anyways, that is got to be the most common, Andy. I see that more in more tournament early season, like Toyota Series, where the A-rig is legal, with people holding up what technique they're using.
Yeah, Flash Mob Junior, baby.
Flash Mob Juniors are lined up, and guys have cases of them in their trucks because they're, like you said, 10, 13 bucks a pop.
Yeah. The saddest thing with the Flash Mob Juniors, when you load up and cast and you see one arm go to the right and the rest of the body go to the left, it's fantastic. But no, the nice part about it is too, just real quick, you can buy them literally anywhere. Any tackle retailer carries them, from Omnia to Walmart to Amazon. They have it. So let's talk about, real quick before we jump into baits, the mods. Is there anything that you guys like to do to your A-rigs to make them swim a little better, but maybe add some extra durability to them?
I think the biggest thing, it's not really more say a modification, but I think balancing your A-rig is super important. When I kind of slightly hit on earlier was the bottom heads that I was using are heavier. That keeps, the head of your A-rig balance. It's not making that, your rig twist on yourself. Keeping the middle one somewhat at that same kind of weight to kind of just, you kind of almost want that free floating in the back. And I'll get to the middle one here in a second. Then your lighter ones are obviously lighter on top. And then the middle one thing I do, you hear about, some people talk about it, is make the middle one typically different from the rest.
Yeah.
I typically don't try to go too wacky with the color. Like if I'm doing shad on the outside, I like to, maybe if I mix up too much, it's like perch on the inside. But if anything, it's more going like ghost colors on the outside to maybe like a white on the inside. But you can see here with Do It Molds, we actually Andy and I poured some heads the other day. It's a chartreuse head, especially with smallmouth being something that they need to pinpoint. That's kind of a cool little tidbit that you could do, is kind of change a little bit of color, especially on the middle one, make it stand out. Because when you do that, you will find most of the fish that you catch are going to come on that middle one, and specifically for that reason.
And also another point that you could add onto that, if you're like a simpleton like I was for a long time, if you take a spiked chartreuse marker, you can draw like a thin lateral line down your middle swim bait on the 5th one right in the middle to create like a target. So you can do like a black Sharpie down it, or a chartreuse Sharpie, or
the
spike it marker, the tail, dip it and spike it. Yeah, just something to make that middle one pop, because that's going to be the target spot for those fish. But what about you, Deacon?
Yeah, so as far as modifications go, these are great out of the package, as are most A-rigs, and it's just little tweaks. I'm not the biggest fan of that specific spring lock there. I prefer the owner one that has the I don't even know what it's, the owner.
It's like a hyper screw lock,
or
something like that. Yeah.
Basically, it has that center pin to line up your swim bait really easy and then spin it on. I think that rides a little better. I like how this already comes with a nice swivel or a barrel swivel on the front there. to have that fish fight and turn. One thing I would like to say, modification that I learned this last year fishing the Toyota Series, Lake of the Ozarks, something not talked about all that much. Lance Freeman is a hammer when it comes to throwing an A-rig, and he's probably going to kill me for talking about this, but
that's what we're here for.
Painting the blades, man. Painting the blades, getting a powder coat and dropping white or orange, weird colors, man. He does some weird stuff with that, and he thinks he gets more bites from it. I've put white on one side, white on the other. Adds a little flash and dingier water, that kind of a thing. Another modification, and not even really a modification, but something I want to really hit home, especially with these thin finesse A-rigs that we like throwing out west out here, especially. You want to be very particular when you bend these wires. So that's the break point. When you lose a fish, and all A-rigs will eventually break off a fish over time. So be ready for that. And especially in tournament setting, I like to use a pretty new A-rig. I don't want something that's had 15 fish on it. Like that's just asking for disaster tournament day. But I like taking my thumb and bending that and for those of you listening on audio, you'll have to watch on video, but bending that right at the point and almost going very slow with that angle. So I'm really not trying to make a direct 90-degree angle or anything.
You're virtually rounding it off.
Rounding it off. That's the best way to put it. Think of a curve on a graph. Like it's going at that way. And that's just to put less stress on that point. But anyways, that's all I got for modifications.
I think really fast to add on that too is be cognizant of when you do that, of what your angle, not just from a where you're bending it out, but from a left to right standpoint, because you can throw your whole rig out in a loop and you'll tangle up while you're casting and that sort of thing. You'll have jig heads catch each other. So making sure because that A-rig is placed perfectly. If you're able to just, like Deacon said, start slowly bending out exactly where he placed his thumb and just be cognizant of that left to right movement. That way you're not, throwing your A-rig out of sorts. It's going to be out of sorts when you catch a fish, but
especially a big smallmouth. But yeah.
No, I like it. And just trying to be cognizant too of like if you do the left one a certain way, try and match it the same with that right one to have that keel be the same. I like it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to dive into like just the sizes of split rings and swivels that I add in. So there's two that are good. I like the VMC or the Owner Hyperwire sizes 3 and 4. The reason why I like those sizes is the pound that they are rated to. So like 60 pound and above is what you want with an A-rig, just because you're slugging it on heavy fluorocarbon or braid. In my situation here, the Niagara River, we're fishing them in a 2 to 3 mile an hour current sometimes. So you're fighting the current and the fish. So all the way around the Flash Mob Junior, I have the swivel here, which is rated. These are VMC. The swivel is rated to 100-pound test. It's a size 3. And then the split ring is rated to 88, and that's also a size 3, what I have. And I'll even put it down here on the 5 arms and direct connect the heads, because the last thing I want on my practice Flash Mob Juniors, these swivels I find sometimes on here that come on it will separate and fall apart as you fight fish and open up. So I found in a tournament setting, I'll go to all split rings. It's direct to the wire, and I don't lose as many fish because of equipment malfunctions. Just simple, easy. It's like $3 for both of these packs. It takes 2 minutes. Cut off the swivels and the clips, and you're good to go. So
rings are a game changer on rigs. Yep.
So let's hop into jig heads now. Kind of speed it up here.
One more modification.
Yeah, go ahead.
Not really a modification, but something that I did bring in here to talk about that I was blown away with. So last 2 years now, I fished Lake of the Ozarks Toyota Series, and it's an A-rig battle, right? But there's a lot of brush, a lot of trees. You're fishing brush piles, that kind of a thing. This is just a lead weight. This 2 ounce is what I like for A-rigs because it's heavy. You've got heavier line. You're going down to hit not exactly where like a crankbait bill or a jerkbait is, where you could use a smaller bait. All that is just a snap there, and you are taking that, opening it, putting it on your line. So this is when your A-rig's hung in a tree. You open your line, and then you lock it on and slide that literally down, get straight over top of it. And I kid you not, it worked 8 or 9 out of 10 times. I lost very few A-rigs. I was very impressed. It's straight on top of it, and it goes down, boom. It's almost like if you've ever had a Carolina rig stuck. you're sitting there jerking it and you feel your weight go donk and come back down. That's what it's doing. And it's literally going, and you can do it over and over, and like 2 or 3 pops, it'll come right off. And if it doesn't, you end up breaking it off. You lose a little piece of 2-ounce lead. Not a big deal.
Hot tips by Adam Deacon on how to save your A-rig.
A ton of A-rigs and brush with that. I can't even explain how powerful that is.
That's awesome. So let's with that A-rig saving tip, let's dive into our jig heads and swim baits. So we talked about how we properly weight the A-rig, right? Lighter weights top, middle, and then heavier weights on the bottom to make it keel properly through the water. What are your favorite swim baits and jig heads to use? Are you more of like a light wire hook or a heavier gauged hook on your A-rig jig heads?
Heavy for sure.
Yeah,
I agree.
I just think when it's one you're typically using a bigger rod with this, especially when you're throwing so much weight. And I mean, in most cases, you're not setting the hook. The fish is typically setting the hook for you. Yeah. You're kind of just trying to hold on. At least that's how you want them to eat it.
Yeah.
With the capabilities of, unlike maybe a Minnesota that's a one hook, the capability of having multiple fish on one bait, I think, is definitely one to be said that you need a heavier hook, because the fish itself will bend it out. The fish hit it so hard, they'll bend it out if you go to a lighter wire. I'm not saying you can't get away with the lighter wire. I just think with this, being big line, big rod, and having so much going on, you're going to want the odds in your favor. I mean, those fish are going to hook themselves with the big hook.
Yeah.
I would go stronger, the better, in my opinion.
I agree.
Yeah, I'm in a complete agreement. And the lesson I think there that I learned was just like anything else, frog fishing or anything where you're doing something heavy, flipping, that kind of a thing. I got burnt in a tournament with a light jig head, and it wasn't because I was fine when it was a long, far away hook set, but I had a fish strike me right at the boat, and by instincts, I mean, I cracked him. You know what I mean? Yep. And when you're that close with a big rod, like that's when
you're flexing that hook right out.
Yeah, I broke the hook too, and that's just what happened. So I've learned that lesson, and I'm in the same boat. I'm a heavy wire guy.
Yeah, so me and Haley, when we were over pouring, this is I believe it's a Mustad 32 876 jig hook in 3/0. This thing is beefy. It's literally made for like heavy duty flipping jigs. Mm-hmm. And it's very important not to have a hook that will flex too much. Flex is good in a hook when you have multiple hooks and they're eating it and running with it, but you don't want it to flex so much that it opens up. So I'm all about the thicker gauge hooks.
Yeah, and that's that Manic mullet jig by Do It Molds. That makes a big difference, especially from an A-rig standpoint. Just from the vertical tie, choosing the hook that you want in it. Then also being the fact that you're making so many of them and you're not spending so much money.
That's a very important point too, is the vertical line tie. You don't want something that's more open face that will cause your baits to almost roll in the A-rig to roll. It's very important to have it the same angle as your hook point, in my opinion. So
I think besides the custom jig heads too, I mean, really fast, I think a great jig head that you can go with that are pretty cheap too, if you don't want to make your own, like Strike King Squadron jig heads.
Phenomenal. Yeah.
Those are good. And you can get I think I got a 6-pack for like $3.
Yeah. Especially the baby Squadron, up here.
Right here.
There you go. Perfect. He's got them locked and loaded.
Real quick, funny story. Last year, me and Bailey fished a tournament.
Fantastic.
And I was using a thin wire, and I was like, I got to get rid of these hooks. And literally, I had like 5 baby Squadrons left in my tackle box. I threw them on. I don't think I lost a fish after that. And I was like, I'm never using thin wire hooks again in my life.
They're a great heavy gauge wire small hook. You can put a Kitech 2.8, Kitech 3.8, and it's keeps the action in the tail for sure.
Yeah. So while we're there, swim baits. What swim baits do you guys use on your A-rigs and why? Because I think this is actually a very important part of the A-rig to mimic the bait fish that you're fishing around in order to properly get bit. So what swim baits do you guys use on your A-rigs?
I keep it super simple. I go, being that typically, at least up here in New York, when it's A-rig season, you're catching a lot of fish. Mm-hmm. So for me, a Kitech's great, but I'm not putting that puppy on an A-rig because it's so soft. It's expensive. I'm putting a Rage Swimmer on there. That's going to last, especially when you pair it with super glue on the jig heads. Those suckers, unless they're short striking swim baits and they're taking the tails off, you're probably going to last a decent amount of fish. And then between that, I have like a Berkeley Power Swimmer for the fact that those are like impossible to break.
Yeah.
Just it's plain and simple a durability thing. And color, I honestly don't change it up much from a flat white to like a ghost shad. Like if it's darker color, I throw white. Clear water, I throw ghost. And if it's different from any of those, I'm probably not throwing an A-rig.
Yeah, I agree. Ghost, pearl white, and then like a straight chartreuse one in the middle, or was this like a sexy shad type KVD sexy shad right in the middle? Something just smallmouth magic, just something slightly different. Although if it is cloudy out, I will go for outside smallmouth magic because I want to match the sky color and go bright white in the center. Yeah,
I'm a white guy when it's cloudy. And then clear days, I'm going ghost minnow. I'm a fan of colors, especially just with how popular A-rigging has gotten, and bait fish in general are not as flashy as I think a lot of our baits show. So you already have all that flash going. You got all your wires. I'm a fan of ghost colors without fleck in them. I'm a Kitech guy still. We don't catch as many fish as you guys do in New York, but
rolling the dough.
no, that color is awesome for me. I don't even know what it's called here.
That looks like rainbow trout.
Ghost rainbow.
Yeah.
So
great
anyways,
color.
Fantastic thing. I have heard that Kitechs, because they're a little heavier than your Rage swimmer, they will actually move more in colder water conditions than a Rage swimmer. I can't tell if that's fact or not, but I like using these more so when the bite's not as good and it's a tough time of year, more so than the Rage swimmer. I use the Rage swimmer just as much, though. I have them both in my boat. I keep it very simple. Those are pretty much the only baits, and the colors you guys all just said are what I'm throwing.
So to touch on your point there, Deacon, if the water is under 48 degrees, I go to the Kitech because it's not how heavy it is. It's the salt content. It's soft and more subtle. So as it comes to the water, the tail swim isn't that much different than the Rage swimmer. The difference is in cold water, the startup is like a half a second sooner, and it's a little bit more finessey. So it doesn't kick as wide as the Rage swimmer does.
That makes sense too, because that's when when it's real cold like that, I'm crawling. Right? Like I'm not doing a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, and that's the biggest difference. Like I will switch over to a Kitech when the water gets below that 48-degree mark, because you do have to swim that thing so slow sometimes, and I want that just extra little kick, a little tighter kick. So A-rig setups. Who wants to nail down their A-rig setup? Because I'm sure we're all about the same here.
Yeah, sure. We can just keep the rotation going. Mine's a 7.6 heavy fast. I'd say I definitely want a faster tip. 200 size Corrado, 20-pound fluoro, and I don't change that ever.
Yeah. That's that's pretty dang same with me. I was on the bandwagon for a little bit there with braid. I don't know if you guys saw the video on social media of me having the rod flat on my hand. Done with that. Much more of I'm either going 17-pound or 20-pound fluoro. I think I've got a 300 Corrado or something, 200. I don't know. It's a bigger Corrado, and that handles everything great. I love it. And I'm 7'6". Actually, I might be 7'8". It might be even a little taller. And there is a little bit of bend in my rod. It's not a moderate at all by any means.
It's like a fast-ish.
Moderate. It's got a load to it, and man, I don't lose fish on it. They hook up great. It's just and I like a long handle on an A-rig rod, similar to a swim bait rod where I can launch something.
Yeah, so I used to be a 7'6" guy, and this year I moved up to a 7'9". I feel like I can cast a little bit further with it, the longer handle, but also it allows the taper of the rod to bend a little bit sooner. So when you hit them in a long distance and you're just reeling and cranking, that rod is more forgiving, so you can really, really reef on them without pulling out a hook.
And I think that's a big deal too, to Bailey's point, 7.6 heavy. Like I think even though mine's a 7.9 or whatever it is, that extra length, even though it is still a fast tip, it has a more curve at that longer.
It's more parabolic.
Yeah, so it's probably not even more of a moderate. It's just got a longer rod, so it's more parabolic on that topic.
And you have to be really particular, and I can't stress this enough, about choosing the right rod for the right application, right? Like if you come in, you're like, I'm just going to throw a 7.6 heavy jig rod with an extra fast tip to throw an A-rig. Yeah, you're going to be able to cast a mile, But sometimes when that fish bites it right at the boat, you could literally break the arm on your A-rig when you set the hook because the rod is just too fast sometimes.
Or
too much of a
out of
pull
his
here.
mouth. Like literally rip it through his lip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where that parabolic bend kind of comes into play because it's a little bit more shock absorbing. And when you hit them close to the boat, you're not going to automatically rip the line out of their face, the A-rig out of their face. So just a little keynote there.
I like it.
Yeah. So what do you guys say? Should we wrap up this first A-rig talk?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Good deal.
So we want to say thank you to everyone for tuning in to the first ever episode here on the Lure Lab, a part of the Serious Angler Network. And we are so excited to bring this new series and show to every one of our listeners and followers and anybody who is new to the platform. And all we're going to ask in return today is to, on the Lure Lab here page, is to hit the subscribe button, leave a comment. If you're listening on MP3, Apple Podcasts, to please leave a review. Helps us get noticed a little bit quicker and a little faster. And to be on the lookout for next week's show as we dive into topwater baits. And for now, guys, have a good day.